You take a pill and in 20 minutes the pain in your head is gone. You don't think twice about it. You just expect your body to be fixable. But for most of the story of human evolution, that expectation did not exist. There was no pill, no doctor, no germ theory, no idea that invisible things could make you sick. And yet humans survived anyway, for hundreds of thousands of years, without any of it. So what did people actually do when they got sick, or hurt, or gave birth, or grew old? The answer is more resourceful and more surprising than the cavemen just died young myth suggests. Start with the biggest misconception, that prehistoric humans simply dropped dead by 30. That number comes from something called life expectancy at birth, and it is deeply misleading. It includes every infant who died in the first year of life, and there were many. Paleo demographers, researchers who study ancient populations, point out that if you survive childhood, your odds of reaching 60 or 70 were far better than the myth implies. The researcher Rachel Kaspari has studied fossil teeth to estimate age at death across human evolution and found something striking. Over time, the number of individuals surviving into older adulthood increased sharply. Grandparents, it turns out, were not rare. They were valuable. An older person, even one who could no longer hunt, could still teach, care for children, and remember things. Survival wasn't only about strength, it was about information, passed down through the people who lived long enough to pass it on. But surviving to old age still required getting through injury and illness first, and that is where things get harder to imagine. Consider a broken leg. Today, that means a cast and a few weeks on crutches. Tens of thousands of years ago, a broken leg could easily mean death, not from the injury itself, but from what came after. An animal that cannot move, cannot hunt, cannot gather, cannot outrun a predator. In the wild, a broken limb is usually a death sentence. And yet the fossil record tells a different story. The paleoanthropologist Alan Walker studied the skeleton of an early Homo erectus individual, cataloged as KNM-ER1808, found in Kenya. The bones showed signs of a severe illness, likely a vitamin A overdose, that would have left this person bedridden and in pain for weeks, maybe months before death. Someone had to have brought that person food and water for that long. Without care from others, death would have come almost immediately. This pattern shows up again and again. Neanderthal remains, like the skeleton known as Shanidar, one from a cave in Iraq, studied for decades by researchers including Eric Trinkaus, show an individual who lived for years with a withered arm, partial blindness, and hearing loss. He could not have hunted or defended himself effectively. He survived anyway, which means his group fed him, protected him, and tolerated the burden of his care for a very long time. Compassion, it turns out, is not a recent invention. It may be one of the oldest survival technologies humans ever had. Injuries were one thing, disease and infection were another problem entirely. And here the absence of germ theory was genuinely dangerous. Nobody understood that invisible organisms cause illness, but that does not mean nobody understood cause and effect. Ancient people were sharp observers even without a scientific framework. They noticed that certain plants reduce pain and swelling even if they had no idea why. Willow bark, for example, contains a compound called salicin, which the body converts into a substance nearly identical to aspirin. Long before anyone isolated that chemistry in a lab, people chewing willow bark for pain had already discovered, through trial and error passed down across generations, one of the most widely used drugs in human history. The Iceman, known as Ötzi, a 5,000-year-old body preserved in the Alps and studied extensively by researchers like Albert Zink, was found carrying pieces of a birch fungus known to have antibacterial and anti-parasitic properties. He also had a series of tattoos placed at joints affected by arthritis and degeneration in locations that closely match modern acupuncture points. Whether or not it functioned the way acupuncture claims to, the placement was not random. Someone believed those specific points mattered enough to mark permanently on his skin. Surgery existed too, and this is the part most people find hardest to believe. Archaeologists have uncovered Neolithic skulls with clean, deliberate holes cut into them, a procedure known as trepanation. The remarkable part is not that the surgery happened, it's that the bone around many of these holes shows healing, meaning the patient survived the procedure and lived for months or years afterward. Someone performed a skull surgery without anesthesia, without any understanding of infection, and the patient walked away from it. Even teeth were treated. In a rock shelter in Italy called Riparo Fredian, researchers led by Stefano Benazzi identified a 14,000-year-old molar with a hole deliberately drilled into it to remove decayed material, one of the earliest known examples of dentistry. Someone, working with nothing but stone tools, was treating cavities. None of this means prehistoric medicine was safe or gentle or even usually successful. Infection killed constantly. Childbirth was especially dangerous for both mother and infant without any understanding of hygiene or the biological process failing silently inside the body. Many treatments almost certainly did nothing or made things worse. There was no controlled testing, no way to separate a remedy that worked from one that simply coincided with recovery. But across tens of thousands of years, patterns of trial and error slowly accumulated into real knowledge. Which plants dulled pain, which wounds needed to be cleaned, which injuries a body could recover from if someone simply kept the patient alive long enough to heal. That knowledge was carried entirely in memory, passed from healer to apprentice, generation after generation, with nothing written down at all. By the time anyone finally did write medical knowledge down, in documents like the Edwin Smith Papyrus in ancient Egypt, describing surgical procedures and anatomical observations in remarkable detail, they were not inventing medicine from nothing. They were recording a tradition that had already been developing, unwritten, for a staggering length of time before it. You inherited the ending of that process. Every pill in your medicine cabinet exists because someone, somewhere, eventually isolated and refined a solution that started as an observation. This plant helps, this treatment works, this patient survived because we didn't give up on them. So the next time you take a painkiller without a second thought, remember what stands behind that convenience. It replaced generations of careful observation. It replaced a body being kept alive by someone else's willingness to care for it, with no guarantee of success. It replaced knowledge that had to be relearned and retaught by every single generation because nothing could be written down. The pill works in 20 minutes now. The knowledge behind it took hundreds of thousands of years to build. If this video meant something to you, subscribe. There's more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.